The refrigerator is full. The bills are paid. Screens glow in every room. The calendar is crowded with school, work, appointments, practices, and obligations. Everyone is moving, everyone is consuming, everyone is connected, and yet if you stop the activity and ask one simple question, silence enters the house. What governs this family? What do we believe? What do we protect? How do we make decisions? Where do we go when we are confused? Who can be depended upon to provide guidance when convenience and principle disagree? The household may have everything it needs to continue functioning, while no one can clearly name the direction in which it is going. That is the crisis we must examine. A supplied house is not necessarily a governed house. Possession answers, what do we have? Direction answers, what are we becoming? Resources can increase options, but responsibility must determine how those options are used. Otherwise, abundance does not remove confusion. It simply gives confusion more expensive equipment. Now listen carefully. Is fatherhood merely a biological title? If a man produces a child, has he completed the meaning of fatherhood? Is it physical proximity? If he sleeps under the same roof but remains emotionally unavailable, morally inconsistent, and relationally unknown, is location enough? Is it financial contribution? If money arrives but wisdom, protection, correction, affection, and accountability do not, has the whole responsibility been fulfilled? Biology matters. Presence matters. Provision matters. But fatherhood is the responsibility that gives order and purpose to all three. This argument is not an attack on mothers. It does not blame children for conditions they did not create. It does not declare that a family without an active father cannot possess courage, order, love, or strength. Many households have developed remarkable strength under difficult conditions, but their strength does not cancel the question of responsibility. We are examining what a father owes the household his fatherhood helped create. Write this principle in your mind. When responsibility has no dependable address, uncertainty spreads. People begin guessing what the household values. Children learn to interpret silence. Decisions are made by pressure, appetite, urgency, or whoever speaks loudest. The consequence is not always immediate collapse. Sometimes it is something quieter, a family that remains busy together while becoming directionless within. So our subject is not whether a man can claim children. Our subject is whether he has accepted the obligations those children place upon his life. We will define those obligations through 5 responsibilities: source, identity, protection, provision, and legacy. We will test them in observable conduct, not impressive language. And because some fathers will recognize failure in themselves, we will also establish a practical path toward repair, a path that respects boundaries, refuses excuses, and rebuilds trust through consistent action. The title may announce a relationship. Only stewardship gives that relationship dependable order. Therefore, before we discuss what a father possesses, we must define the office he is responsible to perform. An office is not created by the personality of the person who occupies it. The responsibility exists first. The person enters it afterward. This means the office establishes the standard. The occupant does not rewrite the standard to accommodate his preferences. A title can identify the occupant, but it cannot excuse the neglect of the work. This is why fatherhood must be defined before it is celebrated. If we celebrate the title without defining the duty, we reward recognition without requiring responsibility. A man may be called father and still need to learn how to function as one. The question is not, what do people call me? The question is, what becomes dependable because I accepted this office? Now, define government carefully. Government in this discussion is the ordering of responsibility under principle. It establishes direction, it protects what has been entrusted, it coordinates provision, it remains accountable for consequences. Government is not uncontrolled power. It is disciplined service that answers for the condition of what it influences. So let us remove the fear immediately. A father is not the sovereign owner of his family. His children are not property. Their mother is not a subject beneath him. His strength does not grant him permission to intimidate, silence, manipulate, or control. Stewardship means precisely the opposite. It means his influence, time, strength, decisions, and resources are entrusted to him, and he is answerable for how he uses them. Authority without accountability becomes domination. Accountability without service becomes empty language. But responsible authority asks, did my conduct create clarity? Did my decisions protect dignity? Did my influence help those entrusted to me grow? Write down the 5 responsibilities that will govern our examination: source, identity, protection, provision, and legacy. They are not 5 decorative virtues. They are connected functions. Source concerns the orientation a father supplies. Identity concerns the belonging and dignity he helps affirm. Protection concerns the safety his disciplined conduct establishes. Provision concerns the resources, time, knowledge, example, and access he responsibly supplies. Legacy concerns the patterns his repeated life teaches others to continue. And every one of these requires presence. Presence does not mean merely sharing an address. It means dependable availability and meaningful engagement. It means participating before the emergency, listening before the crisis, and remaining involved when attention is inconvenient. You cannot govern responsibly from permanent emotional distance. The demonstrated reach of responsibility-centered teaching about family and social foundations shows that this subject has real audience relevance. That attention does not prove a family claim. It simply confirms that people recognize the urgency of the question. This office may be accepted by biological fathers, adoptive fathers, prospective fathers preparing themselves, and mentors carrying genuine paternal responsibility. Yet the primary obligation remains with those who created or accepted that responsibility. Influence may be shared. Accountability cannot be casually abandoned. The office, then, is measured by responsibilities performed, not titles possessed. And its first work begins where every life begins, with source, followed immediately by the question of identity. Source is the dependable point from which responsibility, context, and orientation flow. It answers questions such as, where did I come from? What commitments hold this family together? Which principles guide us when circumstances change? But listen carefully. Being a source of orientation does not make a father the owner of another person's life. A father helps establish direction. He does not imprison destiny. This is where source connects immediately to identity. Identity is not a script a child must perform to earn acceptance. It is the truthful affirmation that says, you belong here. Your life carries dignity. You are connected to us, but you are not required to become a copy of me. A responsible father gives a child context without deciding the boundaries of the child's capacity. He supplies roots without restricting growth. If affection appears only when the child imitates his interests, accepts every opinion, achieves publicly, or protects his pride, that is not affirmation. That is conditional approval. Love must not become payment for performance. Guidance may correct conduct, but it must never communicate that belonging itself has been cancelled. How does a father affirm identity in practice? He learns the child's world. He speaks the child's name with dignity. He listens before correcting. He explains the values of the household instead of merely announcing rules. He remains available when the questions become uncomfortable. He recognizes differences in temperament, ability, interest, and pace without treating difference as betrayal. Notice the distinction between labeling and naming. A label reduces a person to an incident: lazy, difficult, weak, embarrassing, hopeless. Responsible naming tells the truth about failure without turning failure into identity. It can say, that choice was dishonest, without declaring, you are nothing but a liar. It calls attention to dignity, capacity, relationship, and obligation. It corrects because the person matters, not because the father's image has been inconvenienced. And to the wounded listener, perhaps belonging was never spoken clearly over your life. Perhaps absence, rejection, cruelty, or indifference left you carrying questions that were not yours to create. Your father's failure may explain part of your pain, but it does not possess permanent authority over your worth. You are not required to call harm acceptable. You are not responsible for repairing what another person refuses to acknowledge. The missing affirmation can be grieved, and truthful belonging can still be cultivated through safe relationships, responsible community, and a life governed by standards higher than paternal preference. A father also stands beneath that higher standard. He does not invent a child's worth. He is entrusted to recognize and protect it. So take the test. Can each child describe more than what you expect? Can they explain why they belong? Do they know they may approach you with confusion, disagreement, or failure without losing their dignity? If belonging has been named, the next question is unavoidable. Is your presence safe enough for that identity to grow? That question brings us to protection. Protection is often reduced to a dramatic moment. Danger appears, the father becomes forceful, and the threat is confronted. But responsible protection begins long before danger arrives. It pays attention. It prepares. It establishes boundaries. It remains available. Protection is not merely the capacity to fight. It is the discipline to reduce preventable harm and keep help within reach. Write down 4 dimensions of protection. First, physical care. A father notices conditions that threaten health, stability, or bodily safety and takes responsible action. He does not wait for injury before becoming attentive. Second, emotional approachability. People must be able to bring fear, confusion, shame, and failure into his presence without expecting ridicule or uncontrolled anger. This does not mean every feeling governs the household. It means every person can speak honestly enough for wisdom and help to become possible. Third, moral boundaries. Protection identifies conduct that damages dignity, trust, and responsibility. It establishes limits and applies them consistently. A boundary is not revenge. It is a clear statement that certain actions cannot be permitted to govern the family. Fourth, practical advocacy. Sometimes a vulnerable person faces a burden they cannot carry alone. A father uses his access, voice, judgment, and effort to help address the problem. He does not seize control of every difficulty, but neither does he abandon someone simply because the matter is inconvenient. Now notice what protection is not. It is not surveillance disguised as concern. It is not possessiveness presented as love. It is not intimidation called leadership. And it is not removing every consequence until a child becomes incapable of judgment. Genuine protection prepares people for maturity. It teaches discernment, permits appropriate responsibility, and makes assistance reachable when the weight exceeds their capacity. Family emotions and the transformation of daily habits deserve substantial attention here because protection is practiced repeatedly, not merely admired conceptually. So examine the ordinary behaviors. Can you listen without immediately mocking what you hear? Can you control your temper when the truth embarrasses you? Can you keep a confidence appropriately while still acting when safety is genuinely threatened? Can you acknowledge fear without shaming the person who feels it? Can you intervene firmly without making your intervention another source of terror? Here is the test. Does the family become calmer when the father enters, or merely quieter? Quietness can be produced by fear. Calmness grows where strength is predictable, disciplined, and trustworthy. Can a child report failure without first calculating the father's mood? If honesty must wait for the safest emotional weather, the relationship is not yet functioning as a dependable shelter. Listen carefully. The first person a protector must govern is himself. Strength that cannot govern its own anger cannot credibly accept responsibility for another person's safety. Volume is not authority. Threat is not order. The ability to frighten outsiders does not compensate for frightening the household. Fatherly protection is strength governed for another person's safety, growth, and access to help. It anticipates, attends, establishes limits, advocates, and remains approachable. Once safety has been defined this way, another question follows. Beyond defense, what must a father consistently supply? Provision is the consistent supply of what life and maturity require. And we must begin with respect. Material provision is real provision. Food, housing, clothing, education, transportation, health needs, and basic stability do not appear by accident. Many fathers carry serious economic pressure, work exhausting hours, postpone personal desires, and absorb sacrifices their families may never fully see. That labor should not be minimized. But listen carefully. A genuine contribution can become a false completion. A man can say, "I earned the money," as though income has fulfilled every fatherly duty. Then the paycheck becomes an excuse for relational absence. Conversation is neglected. Affection is postponed. Discipline is delegated. Formation is abandoned. Shared life receives whatever energy remains after everyone else has received his best. Money can finance a household, but it cannot substitute for the father himself. Write down 5 provision accounts. First, material necessities, the resources required for responsible daily life. Second, invested time, attention deliberately assigned to relationships, instruction, enjoyment, and participation. Third, practical knowledge, teaching people how to think, choose, work, solve problems, and accept consequences. Fourth, moral example, demonstrating in conduct the honesty, restraint, courage, respect, and responsibility expected from others. Fifth, access, making the father's attention reachable enough that questions, needs, and concerns do not continually encounter delay. These accounts are connected, but they are not interchangeable. A large deposit in one does not automatically settle a deficit in another. Financial abundance cannot purchase back every missed conversation. Expensive gifts cannot teach judgment. Advice cannot compensate for an example that contradicts it. Physical proximity cannot replace attention that is never truly available. So, examine the evidence, not merely the intention. What does the household calendar protect? What is repeatedly postponed? Which commitments receive preparation, punctuality, and focused energy? Who receives the patient version of the father and who receives only his fatigue? If family time exists only after every other demand is satisfied, then the calendar has already announced what the household is expected to survive without. Now, this standard is not a competition in wealth. A father with limited income is not automatically providing less fatherhood than a father with greater means. Provision is responsible stewardship of what is available. Status, spectacle, and costly gifts are poor measures of devotion. A constrained father can still plan honestly, share what he knows, keep his word, offer focused attention, model endurance, and seek appropriate help. Limited resources require wisdom. They do not erase responsibility. And abundant resources increase capacity without guaranteeing stewardship. Do one audit immediately. Identify your strongest provision account. Name it without pride. Identify your most neglected account. Name it without excuse. Then choose one recurring action that begins restoring balance. Protected time, a practical lesson, a consistent conversation, a corrected example, or reliable availability. Do not promise everything. Establish something repeatable, because provision becomes dependable when good intentions enter the household as patterns. And once repeated patterns begin shaping time, responsibility, and expectation, we must ask the next question. What gives those patterns order without turning order into domination? The answer is order. Order means clear values translated into dependable patterns. It is not the suppression of disagreement, and it is not the performance of perfection. A quiet house may still be confused. A polished family may still be governed by fear. Genuine order exists when people understand what matters, what is expected, how decisions are made, and what happens when anyone, including the father, violates the standard. Return to the meaning of government. Responsibility ordered under principle. Healthy government operates through known values, defined limits, consistent processes, and accountability for the person exercising authority. If the father can change every rule according to his preference, then principle is not governing, personality is. Order is not everybody fearing one person's power. Order is everybody understanding the principles that govern the household. Write down 4 instruments of household order. First, shared values. The family should be able to name what it honors: truth, dignity, responsibility, service, restraint, compassion. Values hidden inside one person's mind cannot reliably guide everyone else. Second, predictable routines. Important responsibilities need an appropriate place and time. Meals, rest, work, learning, shared attention, and necessary duties become more dependable when they are not continually renegotiated by impulse. Third, fair boundaries. Expectations must be understandable, proportionate, and consistently applied. A boundary should protect growth and relationship, not display the father's ability to win. Fourth, regular conversation. Expectations must be explained, concerns must be heard, and changing needs must be reviewed. Listening does not surrender responsibility. It supplies the information required to exercise responsibility wisely. And fatherly leadership must cooperate. A father should coordinate with the child's mother, caregivers, and other legitimate authorities. Shared influence does not erase his accountability, but accountability does not authorize competition for supremacy. When adults undermine one another to prove who has power, the child receives conflict where there should have been coordination. Now listen carefully. Example is the first enforcement mechanism. A father who demands restraint must govern his reactions. A father who requires honesty must tell the truth when truth costs him. A father who expects punctuality must respect other people's time. A father who commands respect must practice it toward those with less power. The standard must reach him before it reaches through him. This also separates discipline from punishment. Discipline teaches. It connects conduct to consequence, explains the principle, repairs damage, and develops capacity for wiser choice. Punishment detached from instruction may become nothing more than an adult releasing frustration upon someone more vulnerable. Pain alone does not produce understanding. Establish one weekly household conversation. Keep it brief and dependable. Review needs, schedules, responsibilities, gratitude, and one point requiring repair. Allow each person to speak appropriately. Clarify who will do what and when. Return the following week and review the conduct, not merely the promise. Then apply the consistency test. Are the rules clear enough to explain? Are they stable enough to trust? Do consequences follow conduct or the father's mood? Can concerns be raised without retaliation? Does the father submit to the values he announces? Because if principle governs the household, it must also judge the father. And when his own conduct has broken trust, order requires more than a new rule. It requires an honest return. An honest return begins with this principle. Accountability and hope can exist together. Past failure establishes the need for responsibility, but it does not eliminate the possibility of different conduct beginning now. A father cannot command yesterday to disappear, but he can stop asking yesterday to excuse what he does today. Now, separate shame from responsibility. Shame says, hide, because your failure has permanently disqualified you. Responsibility says, tell the truth, because what you damage deserves an honest response. Shame protects the image by avoiding exposure. Responsibility names the wrong, accepts consequences, and changes behavior. One produces paralysis. The other makes repair possible. Write down 7 movements of repair and keep them in order. First, tell the truth. Name what you did without editing the account to preserve your reputation. Second, listen without defense. The injured person may describe effects you did not intend. Intent does not erase impact. Do not interrupt their pain with explanations about your pressure. Third, apologize specifically. Do not say, mistakes were made, or I am sorry you felt hurt. Say what you did, acknowledge why it was wrong, and identify whom it affected. Fourth, make restitution where possible. Replace what was taken, correct what was misrepresented, fulfill neglected obligations. Repair practical damage where repair remains available. Fifth, make smaller credible promises. Grand declarations often ask injured people to trust an emotion. Promise what can be observed, 1 appointment kept, 1 responsibility completed, 1 boundary honored. Sixth, repeat changed conduct. A single good day may reveal sincerity, but sustained conduct reveals transformation. Seventh, respect the injured person's pace. You may control your repentance. You do not control their readiness. Listen carefully. An apology is not a demand for access. It does not purchase trust, compel forgiveness, guarantee reconciliation, or automatically restore authority. Those affected may require boundaries, distance, supervision, or outside support. Respecting those protections is part of the repair, not an obstacle to it. Think again about trust as an account. Words can acknowledge the debt, but conduct makes the deposits. Credibility may be reconsidered gradually as truth, reliability, restraint, and patience accumulate. You cannot demand a balance that your habits have not rebuilt. And do not confuse repair with image management. Public declarations, expensive gifts, emotional speeches, and dramatic moments can attract attention without changing the private pattern. The real test comes when no audience is present, no praise is available, and faithfulness feels ordinary. Where harm is serious, private family handling may be unsafe or insufficient. Responsible action may require professional, pastoral, legal, safeguarding, or therapeutic support. Seeking proper help is not surrendering responsibility. It is accepting the full seriousness of it. Now write your first sentence. I failed when and I will not excuse it. Then write one action you can complete within the next 7 days. Make it specific, make it safe, make it verifiable, because repeated repair does more than address yesterday. It teaches the household what responsibility looks like, and whatever is repeatedly taught today may become the culture carried into tomorrow. That future culture is called legacy. And legacy is not merely the property assigned after death, the money preserved, the reputation remembered, or the final speech delivered. Those things may matter, but they are incomplete. Legacy is what a repeated life teaches other people to continue. Write this down. Household culture is what people repeatedly see honored, corrected, discussed, celebrated, and repaired. What receives attention gains significance. What escapes accountability gains permission. What is practiced consistently becomes familiar enough to repeat. Therefore, the household is always teaching even when nobody has announced a lesson. This is not a claim that every child will copy every action. Human beings can question, resist, and choose differently. But conduct gives instruction a visible form. Occasional words may describe responsibility. Repeated behavior demonstrates what responsibility looks like under pressure, inconvenience, disappointment, and change. If the lecture praises honesty but daily conduct rewards concealment, which lesson becomes easier to carry? The repeated one. There are two kinds of inheritance before us. The first is inheritance by default. Unexamined anger, silence, avoidance, favoritism, disorder, or neglect moving forward because nobody interrupted it. The second is inheritance by deliberate transformation. A pattern is examined, its damage is named, a different practice is established, and that practice is repeated until the household encounters another way to live. Now bring the 5 responsibilities together. Source gives orientation. These are the principles from which we choose. Identity establishes belonging. Your dignity is not cancelled by difficulty. Protection creates appropriate safety. Strength is discipline for the good of others. Provision supports development. What is needed for life and maturity is supplied responsibly. Order makes these values durable by placing them into dependable practice. And legacy is what happens when this entire pattern becomes clear enough to remember and credible enough to continue. This responsibility is not limited to adults raising children in their own homes. A mentor, teacher, relative, neighbor, or dependable adult may carry generational influence through instruction, example, service, and faithful presence. You may not possess the primary office of fatherhood in another person's life, but your influence can still strengthen what dignity, responsibility, and care look like. So make 3 legacy decisions. First, name one pattern that must stop with you. Do not disguise it. Second, choose one value you will explain clearly, because people cannot intentionally continue what they were never helped to understand. Third, establish one household practice you will repeat for the next 90 days. Make it modest enough to sustain, meaningful enough to matter, and clear enough to review. You cannot rewrite the family's history. You're not required to pretend its wounds never occurred, but history does not have to dictate every future repetition. A repaired pattern can become part of the inheritance. A truthful apology can teach courage. A respected boundary can teach dignity. A changed routine can teach stewardship. Perfection is not the promise. Deliberate responsibility is. Decide what must end, what must be explained, and what must now continue. Then prepare to place that decision into words, because the final movement is not admiration, it is covenant. Now gather the whole argument into one covenant. Fatherhood is an office, not merely a title. That office is responsible stewardship. Stewardship becomes visible through source, identity, protection, provision, and legacy. Those responsibilities create order when principle becomes repeated conduct. Therefore, the proof of fatherhood is not what a man claims in a moment. It is what responsibility can be trusted to find him doing. Write 5 short commitments. Under source, write one action by which you will give responsible direction. Under identity, write one action that will affirm belonging and dignity. Under protection, write one action that will make your present safer and more dependable. Under provision, write one neglected need you will begin supplying consistently. Under legacy, write the practice you intend others to remember because they repeatedly experienced it. Do not write, "I will do better." Better cannot be scheduled. Name the action, the time, and the evidence. Where harm has occurred, add one repair commitment. Tell the truth you have avoided. Complete the obligation you neglected. Honor the boundary that has been established. But remember, repair gives you responsibility, not control. You cannot demand trust, access, forgiveness, reconciliation, or another person's timetable. Your task is to become truthful and dependable, whether recognition arrives quickly, slowly, or not at all. Now say this with sober intention. I accept responsibility for the influence entrusted to me. I will not use authority to dominate, fear to control, money to excuse absence, or yesterday to justify today. I will submit my influence to principles that judge me before I apply them to others. I will give direction without claiming ownership, affirm dignity without rewarding performance, protect without becoming threatening, provide beyond what can be purchased, and establish practices that make responsibility dependable. Where I have caused harm, I will tell the truth, make repair where possible, and respect the boundaries of those affected. I will not promise perfection. I will practice accountable presence. I will interrupt what should not continue, explain what deserves to be understood, and repeat what is worthy of inheritance. If you are an active father, put that covenant into conduct. If you are preparing for fatherhood, begin forming the character the office will require. If you are a mentor, define your sphere clearly and serve within it faithfully. If you are a wounded adult, identify the healthy pattern you will build, welcome, or require. You are not obligated to grant unsafe access in order to prove that you have grown. Return now to that household we first examined. Its decisive change is not another possession. It is a dependable person accepting responsibility and helping turn stated values into daily practice. Direction gains an address, safety gains a pattern, provision gains presence, legacy gains a deliberate beginning. Before this day closes, choose one action. Schedule the first conversation, complete the 7-day repair step, or begin the 90-day practice. Put it on the calendar now. The lecture ends here. The covenant enters the house through what you do next.